Today we begin Psalm 91, which of all the 150 Psalms is the most protective both in tone. In fact, its tone is hyperbole of God's immediate protection by trust in God, as well as a quality of antiphonal song. And you'll see, I'll post in a moment, this particular psalm is done in 3 voices. And I've identified those voices with different kinds of script. But as is the nature, we're not sure whose voices we're listening to. So here are some possibilities. Adin Steinsaltz, the great translator of the Talmud into Hebrew and into English, has also translated the book of Psalms and written a commentary. He imagines Psalm 91 as performed with a chorus on the Temple Mount, with a individual, a prayerful person having 2 short lines and a chorus singing long metaphors of assurance, and then at the end, God's voice. Now others, because it doesn't say who these voices are per se in the text, see it as a psalmist with being answered by a priest. And likewise, some would say the voice of God at the very end is also a priest. Could be even the same priest, but in a different voice. Here's something that I'll point out, and that is 2 things, and then I'll post the psalm. When God speaks in the last 3 verses, it's unlike the rest of the psalm. There is no repetition of words except for the word ki, which means for, from what came before. There's no use of metaphor. And this is a psalm packed with metaphors. And so God's voice at the end is somewhat distinctive. The thing that's distinctive to the, if you will, the psalmist voice is there's only a verse and a half. You'll see how they're separated. It's the only place you hear God's intimate name, the Yud He Vav He, the 4-letter tetragrammaton. That intimate name of God is only put into the mouth of the supplicant. Otherwise, you'll find a name of God here that's rarely used. It's only used in one other place in Psalms, though it is in Genesis, and that's the name El Shaddai. You'll see that in the very beginning. But the last comment is the following. I have this challenge of translation as a way to learn these Psalms more deeply. You'll see in verse 1 that it's not clear because there's an ellipsis, a gap, kind of like a pronoun. I translate one who dwells. Well, who is that one? Is that referring to God, or is that referring to the supplicant? You'll see why at the end it makes a big difference, and I'll share some translations that will have it in 2 different ways. Verse 1 describes God. Most translations see it as describing the supplicant. With that, one who dwells in the secret place of the Most High, in the shadow of Shaddai, is abiding. And now the supplicant. I will say, for Adonai is my refuge and my stronghold, my God, I will trust in God. And now the chorus begins. For God will save you from a snare of a trapper, from pestilence presence. With God's wings, God will cover you, and under God's plumage, you will find refuge. A shield and armor is God's truth. You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, the pestilence that in the darkness stalks, of the scourge that demonizes at noon. Falling at your side 1,000 and 10,000 at your right hand, but you it will not reach. But with your eyes you will look, and the payback of the wicked you will see. And now the supplicant. For it is you, Adonai, who is my refuge. And the chorus. The Most High you have made your dwelling place. Evil will not befall you, and plague will not come near your tent. For God's angels, God will command for you to protect you in all your ways. Upon their palms they will carry you, lest you bang against a stone your foot. On lion and viper you will tread. You will trample lion cub and snake. And now God's voice. For me he yearned, and I will free him. I will give him haven, for he has known my name. When he calls upon me, I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will rescue him and grant him honor. With length of days I will satisfy him and show him my deliverance. Now this last piece, these last lines attributed to God or in God's voice, whether said by a Kohen or a Levite, or if you will, as heard in the mind of the psalmist by God, are distinctive to the rest of the psalm, and that there's no metaphors, and except for the first word, which is simply the word for, key, none of the words are repetitions of what came before. In that sense, it's distinctive. I'm reminded of a story of my mother. I often quote my mother regarding how you hear. She said there was, a note, a letter that a father and mother received from their son, and the father read it and was very upset. And he gave it to his wife and says, "Look at what your son wrote." And she reads it and says, "What? There's nothing upsetting. He wrote, 'Please send me some money.'" So she heard it as a supplication. He heard it as a demand, which is to say, it's not only that words can be ambiguous, but the tone with which we hear the words can be ambiguous. Keep that in mind, because where I'm going to with this teaching is to share that the tone of God's voice here can be understood in one of two ways, which is either total assurance or incomplete assurance. I'll come back to that. That's to put in the back of your mind as I begin at the beginning with that opening verse. Now, I shared that Yoshev Beseter Elyon has a pronoun. He sits in the security of the Most High. Well, who's the he? Is it God or is it the supplicant? Is number 1, verse 1, the title of the psalm? Or is it the chorus describing the supplicant? And in that sense, if it's the chorus, it's one who dwells in the secret place of the Most High, and the shadow of Shaddai is abiding. Words of reassurance that will then get further developed. Listen to these two different translations. Now here's one by Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, the great creator of the Jewish renewal movement. He translated Psalms. His opening of Psalm 91 reads differently. He sees this as a description of God. In concealment, you dwell, Most High, Almighty. You linger in the shadow. Here's another translation. This is a book, very thick book, by Martin Rosenberg and Bernard Zlotowitz. They also have verse by verse kind of modernish commentary. Here's their translation. They will squarely see this as the lines to the Psalter by either a priest or a chorus. O you, small y, who dwells in the shelter of the Most High and lodge in the protective shade of Shaddai. My translation leaves it a bit ambiguous. One who dwells in the secret place of the Most High, in the shadow of Shaddai is abiding. So at least the first half of that is ambiguous. And again, hold that thought as we get to the closing of God's words. So here's the one line of the penitent, the psalter, the pilgrim to Jerusalem. I will say, for Adonai is my refuge and my stronghold. Elohai, my God, eftach bo, I will trust in him, in God. In my translations for God, I try to avoid using gender. Hence, whenever the pronoun is like him, that's why I put it in parentheses as God. So the statement of the psalmist, psalter, the penitent, is one of abiding trust in God. That's the key word, trust. Trust in God. And this psalm, Psalm 91, will be used widely in Jewish and Christian prayer and more as a source of protection. We traditionally chant Psalm 91 before we go to sleep at night in the Jewish tradition. It's also part of all Christian liturgical traditions. I shared in my letter before the class this poem by Father John Michael Junkus, who's a priest in St. Paul, Minnesota, who wrote a poem on eagle's wings that NPR recently did a segment on, in that President Biden referred to the poem on eagle's wings as a statement of his faith. And that poem is based on Psalm 91. And so these expressions of trust in God, verse 2, is a reason that this psalm would become so popularly used in Judaism and Christianity, along with the promise that with trust in God comes God's protection. Verse 3, for God will save you from a snare of a trapper. Technically, or often, Yakush is a fowler. So in the King James Version, it will save you from a fowler's snare, from pestilence presence. So Dever is one of the 10 plagues, pestilence. With God's wings will cover you, and under God's plumage you will find refuge. A shield and armor is God's truth. And here again, the image, lots of metaphors of God's protective nature. In the poem I just mentioned by Father Junkus, he actually calls it On Eagle's Wings. He will be quoting parts of verses 4 and 5, but he'll make reference to an eagle's wings, conflating this image with Exodus chapter 19, verse 4, in which God will say, after delivering the Israelites from Egypt, "Ve'asa etchem al kanfei nisharim," and I carried you on the wings of an eagle. And so although here the bird that is protecting God is not necessarily an eagle, in that sense, that poem conflates that image. An eagle, the commentators of Exodus will emphasize, is the bird that flies the highest and carries its young on top of its wings to assure their safety. Actually, under its wings, distinctly, because it's so high up, it's not afraid of being attacked. Anyway, back to our psalm. There are synonyms here: God's wings, evrato, and kenafav. Kenafav is the word used in Exodus 19:4. Here I use the word plumage because I found a beautiful commentary. First, Rashi defines it as feathers. By the way, in King James Version, it's with God's feathers first and then wings second. But the commentary of Rashi does the second one as feathers. And a contemporary Hasidic Rebbe who died recently, the Bavarian Rebbe who lived in Brooklyn, he said that the colorful feathers are our mitzvot. Every time we do a good deed, those are our protective, colorful feathers. So I kind of like both Rashi and the Bavarian Rebbe, hence my translation of plumage. But here's another thing to circle. Verse 4, the word truth. A shield in armor is God's truth. For ultimately, it is God's truth that is the source also of seeing how we are protected. When we live with integrity, when we are attuned to God's truth, then we are protected. Now, verses 5 and 6, I shared with you the Grateful Dead song, My Sisters and Brothers, in which Jerry Garcia says, as the Bible says, and then he'll quote verses 5 and 6. Verse 5 also was popularly used as an amulet in Europe. That verse itself is a description of demons. You will fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, the pestilence that in the darkness stalks, of the scourge, Yashud, that demonizes at noon. And the classic biblical commentators, Rashi, Ibn Ezra, into Prague of the 18th century, the Mitsuda David as a commentator, will say that verses 5 and 6, these words, pestilence, scourge, now back to 5, terror and arrow, are different names of demons, different kinds of demons. And I will add, because of a shortage of time today, I won't do a riff on demonology and angels, but demonology or demons are part of the Talmud. They're active in the Zohar. They're active in Hasidic thought. Adin Steinsaltz, in a more contemporary mode, will define angels as positive energy and demons as negative energy. Again, more to say about demons and angels, but this part, 7 and 8, falling at your side 1,000 and 10,000 at your right hand, but you, the supplicant, it will not reach. But with your eyes you will look, and the payback of the wicked you will see. That ends the first unit. And it ends this unit with hyperbole. Benjamin Siegel, a commentator, will point to verse 7 and say those are the biggest numbers in the entire Bible. 10,000 falling at your right hand and 1,000. That's probably referring either to the demons, 10,000 demons, because that's what is the verses before, or it's your enemies. Thousands will fall all around you, and they won't reach you. You will be safe. Again, this quality of hyperbole in terms of large numbers and untouchable. Your eyes will look, and the payback of the wicked you will see. You will be protected. And this last word, you will see, is the middle word of the psalm. And I'm into the middle as the bullseye. So if you see that, the center of this psalm is, the wicked you will see, for it is you, Adonai, who is my refuge. That's the very center of the psalm. And now, verse 9, the voice of the psalmist. For it is you, Adonai, who is my refuge. The only second time that the word Yud-He Vav-He, Adonai, is mentioned, with the same emphasis, and in fact, the key word, Machsi, my refuge, we saw in verse 2. So in verse 2, we saw it in the same place, the words of the petitioner. Adonai is my refuge, La Adonai Machsi. Now verse 9, Adonai Machsi, which again is the way of Psalms often, repeating words for emphasis. And now back to the choir. The Most High you have made your dwelling place. And again, these extraordinary words of assurance, they are extreme. Evil will not befall you. The nega, plague, will not come near your tent. Hence my title, and plague will not come near your tent. For God's angels, God will command for you to protect you in all your ways. And verse 11 again has what will be developed more in rabbinic writings, the notion of guardian angels that God will assign us to protect us in this world, and that will testify when we die to our deeds. Upon their palms they will carry you. Again, this image of such total protection. The angel, the protective angel, carries us lest we bang against a stone on our foot. And lion and viper you will tread, you will trample lion, cub, and snake. So we go from being carried to walking, but when we walk, even the natural order, that which could be a threat, the lion, which you know, is the big animal, and the viper often hidden in the grass. Don't worry, you're totally protected. It's absolute. Now, it's metaphor. Now, I want to say there is a lot to be said for affirmations, kind of a New Age term, that when we have the confidence of being protected, we feel protected. Psychology, self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe you are going to win, that helps your ability to be focused. And so this psalm and these metaphors are those that can also be understood of affirmations of safety in the extreme. If you trust in God fully, God will fully protect you. And now God's voice. For me he yearned, and I will free him. Ki vi chashak. The word chashak can be desired, can lust for. Because this person. But now who's God talking to? God is not talking to the supplicant. Is God talking to the choir? It's not clear who the audience is, but God is talking in the third person. He's talking about himself about the supplicant, third person in terms of the supplicant. Because this supplicant yearned for me, loved me, I will free him. Free him either from the danger of foes, free him from fear. I will give him haven, safety, for he has known my name. The name being referred to is often Yud He Vav He. And again, it's only the supplicant who used that word Yud He Vav He. And we've seen a recurring theme that God seeks to have God's name praised. When he calls upon me, I will answer him. But here's the question. Will I answer him immediately? Or two? Why would he need to call my name? Because the chorus has just said of this supplicant, don't worry about a thing. You are protected. Verse 15 implies you, supplicant, will be facing dangers. It's not foolproof, or if you will, the protection is not fully in place. I will be with him in trouble. But the question, when? I will rescue him and grant him honor. Now, there you can comment that God will not only rescue him from enemies, implying that there still are enemies, and grant him honor, will even go beyond rescue and make him noble, which can be understood he will become honored by virtue of victory by those who might have been his foes. And the closing line, Orech Yamim Aspiehu, with length of days I will satisfy him, Ve'erehu b'shu'ati, and I will show him my deliverance. That's also resonant with the last line of Psalm 23, V'shafti beveit Adonai la'orech yamim, the same two words as in verse 16, which is, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of my days. Psalm 90, now I'm going to pull it all together. Psalm 90 dealt with life being short and fleeting. 1,000 years in God's eyes are like yesterday. And here, in contrast, Psalm 91 is identified with longevity of days through God's protective care. So the question that I opened with, how do you hear the tone of God's words? I tend to hear them as being very reassuring. For me, he yearned and I will free him. This is God saying, yes, I will be there for you, supplicant, because I know you love me. Benjamin Siegel, the commentator, raises a question. And he says, this may be God saying, don't get carried away. This is classic biblical theology, 14 to 16, which is, I will protect you, but be patient. In due time, you will have length of days to see my goodness. In that regard, back to verse 1. Is God the God of mystery, the one who dwells in the secret place, and therefore do not define how God will necessarily respond, but hold God as other, as the source of protection, but in a mysterious world? Or is Psalm 1 to be a statement to the penitent? You will dwell in the secret place of the Most High. You will surely be protected. As is the case for these uncertainties, I am comfortable reading them both ways. I am comfortable seeing and feeling and hearing Psalm 91 as the affirmation of trust, do not fear, and all will be fine, and yet know that there is uncertainty in life too, that God is mystery and God is a caring presence. With that, I'm going to stop the share and do something a little bit different today. There's so much more I would want to tell you about the details of this psalm. And on Thursday, we have a very short psalm, and we'll have more room for discussion. And at that time, I will hold on to and write any questions that this psalm might have evoked. By the way, I'll add, Psalm 90 is attributed to Moses. It's the only psalm, right? Tfilat Moshe. Well, the rabbinic commentary is he also wrote the next 10 psalms, meaning Psalm 91 is one of 11 Moses psalms, but he was so humble, he didn't want his name on all of them, just on the first one. And that Psalm 91, he said, again in the Midrash, either going up to Mount Sinai in the cloud being afraid, this was his poem, or in the dedication of the tabernacle, entering into the cloud, this was his psalm. But for the rabbis, this psalm largely is identified with Moses and as trust in God. With that, we have the privilege of honoring today Amy Robinson Katz, who I smile when I see, who has a special connection to Psalm 91. I wanted her to sing a little, explain that connection, and also talk about prayer song, how Amy uses verses from Psalms as a meditative tool. Go ahead, Amy.
Sure. I'll talk a little bit about prayer song, and then I'll share this piece that I have for you. So prayer song is a practice that I developed, but it's largely based on an experience that I had in college when I was studying at Oxford, chanting with a Taizé community. And Taizé is a monastic community in Belgium. And they have a specific type of worship, specific type of chanting. It's kind of Gregorian, but it's their own flavor of it. And a lot of their chants are very short. They're like 8 bars, and they're often written in 4-part harmonies. And I would go, when I was doing this study abroad, I would go to this Taizé group, and I would sing the alto line. And it's just, it'd be like these 8 bars over and over again, and the alto line. And I that was just in heaven. I love singing in 4 parts like that. And the concept of this kind of singing that they do at Taizé, Rabbi Spitz has had the pleasure of visiting Taizé, and it's on my bucket list. I'm going to do that one day. But I experienced this group in Oxford, and they take a piece. It's often from Tehillim, and they're singing. Taizé is a Catholic, group. They're singing often in Latin, sometimes French, sometimes Spanish, sometimes English, but most of the pieces are from Tehillim. And they like to sing to infinity. And so the practice of prayer song was taking this idea, and sing to infinity just means that you sing a lot of times. And it's just a little nugget of music, and they're singing it a lot of times. And they do this to transcend the specifics of the notes. All of their stuff is notated, so they actually have music in front of them. And the text, but actually to experience that text, to feel transformed by it. And so that practice is sort of what inspired me to kind of start prayer song. Prayer song is something that I do. It also came about when I was working on my Hebrew. I did not grow up going to Jewish day school or religious school, and I worked on my Hebrew in my 20s, and I started at the very beginning with Aleph Bet. And when I was just learning very basic Hebrew and sounding out words and stuff, I would take pieces of Tehillim, which were something that were really important to me and something that I could identify with and connect with, and I would sing just a few words, and I would use Taizé melodies and sometimes my own melodies and others' melodies, and just sing those little phrases over and over and over as a way to get those words in my mouth. And so that's a little bit about prayer song. We've been doing prayer song online since the pandemic. There's going to be one soon. We've had a few months off, but there's going to be one soon, so hopefully you can join for that. So I want to tell you a story about Psalm 91 and share a piece that's a piece from Taizé. I'm the oldest of 3 kids. It's me and my sister Allison and my brother Micah. Micah is 8 years younger than me. He's the baby of the family, and he served 2 tours in Iraq, one in 2004 and one in 2007. And both of those tours were really hard on our family, especially the first. Both of them were, but especially the first one in 2004. Micah shipped out 1 week after his 19th birthday, and he spent 13 months in Iraq. And 2004 was really early in that conflict, and things were pretty wild still. And even though he was in a construction battalion, which was it was not a combat job, but it was really scary. And in 2004, technology wasn't what it is now. I remember at that time just hearing about Yahoo Chat. That was new to me, and it was a very big deal. And our whole family would get on the chat room, and it was like once a week that we could chat with him. And it was like a big event, like, oh, Micah's chatting. So it was a scary time. Psalm 91 really became an important psalm for our family during that time. My grandmother printed it up on little cards, and we all had it, and we were saying Psalm 91 all the time. And for my brother and for the people that he was with, the other soldiers that he was with. And that psalm, but just the experience of having him there awakened this hyper vigilance. And if you've experienced this, whether it's a soldier or some other situation in your life where someone you love is in danger or you're concerned about them, there was this sense of vigilance. And I would pray this prayer, God, send a legion of angels on every hair of his head. Protect him, every cell of his body, head to toe, every organ, every bone, every piece of him, physically, and his heart and his mind and his spirit. God, be with every piece of him. And I would pray this prayer and ones like it. And I would do it as often as I thought of him, and that was all the time. And so eventually my prayer became condensed and sort of abbreviated, and I would just say head to toe. And it was like this and that was like encompassing all of that. And I would say it over, head to toe, head to toe. And we would say Psalm 91, I would say it by myself. And I would just think of this image of God as the mother bird with her, with her little chicks underneath her wings. And, that sort of that protective, nurturing posture and dwelling in that protection and that shade. But so God is the protector and the nurturer, but also sort of the defensiveness of it, like back off, like that, like that. Like, and I felt that, like, sort of like that. I was like, God, just, protect him, defend him, like this. And that was how I was feeling in the in Psalm 91. So this piece is from Taizé, and I'm using their melody. They sing it in a Latin melody with little different words, but I sing it here to the first verse of Psalm 91. One day, when this pandemic's over and we're all together, we'll sing it together. It's really sung in a round, like in a canon, so all the parts overlap each other, but I can't do that. So I'll just sing a little of it here. It goes like this. Your shape is cited, Elyon, Betzel Shaddai, Tolonan, Yainai, Yainai, Yananai, your shape is cited, Elyon, Betzel Shaddai, Tolonan, Yainai, Yananai, Yananai. Even though you're on mute, you can sing it with me. Let's try it. Your shape is cited, Elyon, Betzel Shaddai, Tolonan, Yainai, Yananai, Yananai. Your shape is cited, Elyon, Betzel Shaddai, Tolonan, Yainai, Yananai, Yananai. Let's do one more. Your shape is cited, Elyon, Betzel Shaddai, Tolonan, Yainai, Yananai.
Thank you, Amy, for enabling us to be reminded that these words are heartfelt words and that song opens the heart. And it's a reminder because in presenting it analytically, as I do by sharing how the psalm is composed so artfully and even ambiguously, at the same time, there are choices that are made about how to read a psalm to have a quality, in this case, of assurance, of protection. And your introductory line, sung so beautifully with that Taizé melody, is the reminder of, again, psalms as musical, psalms as heartfelt. Thank you.
Thanks.
It's a treat to honor you today.
Thank you.
One last word on your part?
I wanted to tell you, so this hymn that you mentioned, On Eagle's Wings, you mentioned it to me last night when we were on the phone, and it reminded me that I know this hymn, and it's one of my grandmother's favorites, and I thought maybe I would just sing the first line,
Please.
First bit of it. Is that okay? So this is the one.
Give context of what Amy's going to sing. On Eagle's Wings, you'll find it in my letter before, sung as well as the words, and it's a recently composed hymn that has caught the attention. And actually, it was sung at the service for the people who had died in Oklahoma bombing. And in that sense, transitioned from being the words of a priest to being, if you will, a national hymn of seeking God's protective presence. Go ahead.
It's really lovely. And he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make then there's verses to it, but that's the chorus. Isn't it lovely?
Thank you, Amy. Always a treat, and a treat in this case to also honor you as the focus of our dedication of our community learning. Many tune in as well to honor the memory of loved ones. I now pull up the Kaddish for those observing a yurtzeit or are in mourning to join together to honor with the Kaddish prayer. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, Bi'alma divra kirute v'yamlich malchute, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevarach le'olam olmei olmaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, Vitadar, Vitale, Vitalal, Shemei Dekudsha Barihu, Le'ela, Inkol Birchata, Vishirata, Tushbechata, Venechemata, Damiran Bialma, Viruame, Yehe, Shlama, Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu, V'alkol Yisrael, Viruame, Ose, Shalom V'rumav, Uya Aseh Shalom, Aleinu Velkol Yisrael Velkol Yoshvei Tevel Vimru. Amen. Tomorrow is Psalm 92, which is called the Psalm of the Sabbath. We sing it on Friday night. We sing it Saturday morning. By the way, I will add regarding Psalm 91. Now I'm looking at Amy, with whom I often have the privilege to lead services. Psalm 91, which we study today, is part of Psukei de Zimra, the introductory prayers on Shabbat and holidays. It's also said again right after the Amidah at the end of the Sabbath. It's also said, as I noted, at bedtime. Psalm 92, tomorrow is the Psalm of the Sabbath. And Carl Cedar, who I often lead services with, will be our honoree tomorrow. This week, Thursday, will be Hal Hurwitz is our prayer team. Being involved and honored. And again, I thank Amy Robinson Katz for agreeing to be honored today and for bringing her melodic and learned voice to our sharing of Psalm 91. To everybody, thank you for participating. You give me joy. Good to see each of you. Have a good day. Hopefully tomorrow together, Psalm 92.